So hello, everyone, officially. Thank you for joining us for our Principal Investigator Research Series. My name is Gina O'Connor. I'm a grant specialist here at USD at ORSP. This is our last event in the series for spring 2023, but we'll start again with a new lineup this fall. We are recording this session, and I'll post it to our YouTube channel, which is simply called USD ORSP. And once we get started, I'll drop a link to our YouTube channel in the chat so you can bookmark it or save it for later. And if you have any questions, you can either put those in the chat, you can put them in the Q&A, you can unmute yourself. We're not too large of a group today, so that'll, however you want to do it is fine. We are particularly grateful for Anna Simonson for putting together this presentation. Anna has already done 2 presentations for us so far this year, both on the new NIH data management and sharing policy. This time, Dr. Simonson will be providing an ORCID ID overview. And just as a quick refresher, Dr. Simonson is the librarian liaison to the medical school and the health and natural sciences. She is the head of a new library initiative named Digital Scholarship and Research Services that aims to support the research of the faculty, staff, and students at USD. So thank you again, Anna, for your time and putting together this 3rd presentation for us. And if you're ready to go, I'll let you get started.
I think we have all the technical glitches worked out. So hello, thank you all for being patient and for joining us today to talk about ORCID. So for those of you who aren't familiar with ORCID, ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. I will only say that one more time, and actually even ORCID doesn't want you to say that because it's pretty cumbersome. So ORCID just wants you to refer to them as ORCID. So hopefully by the end of the session today, our goal is that you'll know more about what ORCID can do for you as a researcher. But I want to start out with a quick poll. I'm going to have Gina launch a quick poll to see how many of you have an ORCID ID already. And it's anonymous, I should say that too. Great, so almost everybody's responded. So it looks like about a little over half does. And about 30% no, and 10% not sure, which is totally normal because I actually wasn't sure about my own when I was putting this together. So I had to go back in and check, and that happens a lot. And we will learn about how you can delete a duplicate ORCID account if you happen to have one, because this is not uncommon. So I'm going to end that poll. Share the results here. Okay. So our agenda today is 3 things. So first, we're going to talk about what ORCID is. Then we're going to go over the benefits of ORCID, what ORCID can do for you as a researcher. And lastly, we will help you get your ORCID ID. If you already have it, you can still benefit from this because we will not just get the ID, which only takes like 30 seconds, but we will start going through the actual record sections and start helping you fill those out, start connecting you to those external features through something called search and link. And then lastly, we'll end with a Q&A. But as Gina said, you can just pop any question into the chat at any time, or you can unmute yourself and just talk. So it doesn't need to be super formal today. So our first agenda item, what is ORCID? So as I said before, and this is the only other time I will say this, ORCID stands for Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. So it's a global, free, unique, persistent identifier. And it's actually 2 things. So when you say ORCID ID, you're referring to the 16-digit number that you actually get when you register for an account. That's your PID. When people ask for your ORCID ID, it's the 16-digit number. When you refer to ORCID, you're referring to the record that is created when you sign up for an account, because you get both of those things with that registration. So you probably have been hearing more about PIDs lately, and a PID, just briefly, is a long-lasting reference, and it's unique to an entity, like a data set, a paper, or a person. And it's a machine-readable string of characters, and the reason that's important is because it's interoperable with various systems. So they're explicitly mentioned, PIDs are explicitly mentioned in several of the FAIR facets that we've talked about before: the findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. And so this is something that funding agencies, governmental funding agencies are encouraging more and more. ORCID is a little over 10 years old at this point, and in 2022, just for those of you who are curious, there were about 9 million, a little over 9 million active records. So when ORCID first started, they had a vision, and they've really kept that vision this whole time. And that was a world where all who participate in research, scholarship, and innovation are uniquely identified and connected to their contributions across disciplines, borders, and time. So with this vision, ORCID, you can see, is in a great position to be a part of the open access, open science initiatives that we see happening all around us, right? The NIH in January with the requirement, the new requirement for the data management and sharing plan. So you can see that ORCID, and really ORCID is the main one, and it is sometimes the required PID that researchers have by publishers and other funding agencies. So that's why it's important to learn about ORCID. It's not the only one, but it is the one that is most referenced. So just to give you a little bit of background, in the US, there's actually been a recent surge in interest in ORCID, which is why we're doing this today. Since in August of 2022, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy released the Nelson Memo. That's the nickname for it. And it recommended that all federal agencies develop these new plans, or to update their old plans, to indicate how they would provide public access to the outcomes of research that was federally funded, right? So that NIH change is a part of that. So it's about providing free, immediate, and equitable access to this federally funded research. No embargoes, things like that. So the Nelson Memo also mentioned PIDs. Agencies were directed to create plans to collect metadata like author names, affiliations, funding agencies, grant numbers, and to provide PIDs associated with the researcher whenever it was possible. So some, people, organizations and publishers are reacting to this in different ways. Some are requiring it. Some are just at this point highly recommending it. But I think more and more will turn to it being a requirement by, as you can see this timeline, by December of 2025. So let's look at what an ORCID ID actually looks like. So again, it gives you a free unique identifier, which is that number on the right-hand side there. And it looks like a website, it looks like a link, and that's because it is. You can click on that and it will take you, your ORCID ID will take you to your ORCID record. And the ORCID ID was invented with the purpose of creating, again, name ambiguity was a big problem. Okay, so it was created to identify a single researcher and make it very easy to find everything that that person had published or was working on or had presented on. So in this example, right, researchers do a lot of things, right? You speak at conferences, you do research, you publish research, you teach, right? But to keep all of those things in one organized place was the goal. And so that links to your ORCID record when you click on that, that number. And this is a blank screen of what your ORCID record will look like when you first register for that ID. So you'll see on the left-hand side, you'll see your ORCID ID. And then you can actually put other IDs on this site. So other names that you've gone by, you can add that. You can get a QR code, which is great. You can add your websites, emails, and in fact, they encourage you to do more than one email address, just in case you lose access to your other one. But you'll see they want you to fill out certain categories that have to do with who you are as a researcher, who you're affiliated with, your employment, your education and qualifications, and so on and so forth. So the ORCID record, just so you know, is always evolving. In the last time that I had looked at it, it looked a little bit different. So don't be alarmed if when you log in and create your record, if you don't do it today, if it looks just a little bit different, if something is in a little bit of a different place, because they're trying to make it more user-friendly. So that's what ORCID, the ORCID ID and ORCID is. So now I want to tell you about why you should sign up for this at all. And there are actually quite a few benefits to researchers for having an ORCID ID. It distinguishes you from other researchers. And that is a big one because, as you know, people have the same names, right? So it distinguishes you. Like if you did an author search in PubMed, if you have a name that's shared with a lot of people, it's very hard to disambiguate that. But ORCID helps you do that. And PubMed does connect with ORCID, so you can put your ORCID ID in there and it will be linked to your name. So in this way, it bolsters your reputation, your digital identity, right? You will not be mistaken for somebody else. Somebody else will not be mistaken for you or get credit for your work. The other thing is that it persists over time, right? It's a link that is not going to die. And you'll see, hopefully by the end of this, you'll see how it can save you time to on applying for grants, publishing, on reporting your workflows, various things because of the way that it connects. I also want to point out here that you do have complete control over the privacy features of ORCID, which is another benefit. ORCID doesn't want anyone else controlling your record. You have complete control, who has access to it, who can see what. And so that is, and they're always improving on those things, but that is one of the big benefits of having it. So just to, we'll kind of go through those in more detail. And I really like this example. ORCID actually uses this article as an example of the names. And this article has over 2,000 authors in it. And hundreds of people have the same names in it. So if you can think of someone who has the same name as you, that it, you know, it will distinguish you from those other people. There's another Anna Simonson who is I think a physical therapist in Minneapolis or in Woodbury or somewhere up there. And oftentimes I would get mixed up with her. So also it helps if you have ever gone by a different name. So it helps kind of uncomplicate things in your research workflow, right? You don't have to think, oh, what did I go by last time, right? It is going to link you regardless of how you registered your name or had your name put in the publication, right? So any variation of your name will still be linked to that same account. As I mentioned before, a great feature is that you can create a QR code that links directly to your ORCID record. So you can put it on posters and presentations or other research output that you have. So you're at a conference, you're doing a presentation, you can have your that QR code. So somebody is who is in the watching your presentation could click on that and see other things that you have done. Yes, I see that we have a question. Logan, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
I got a quick question. So obviously with the name and everything can be linked. Now, if for some reason you get married or divorced or, you know, things happen in life, how does that work with being linked that way?
Yep, so you'll see in the ORCID record where you can put your other names if you so choose. But it's not like ORCID goes out and like, it's not going to go out and mine the internet for your stuff. But what you can do is connect it to those other things, right? So if you get married and you continue to use your ORCID ID, it will always link you back to your record. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, yep. But you will have to put in a little bit of legwork for that, just to go and find those things that you've previously done. So the QR code, yeah, it could just help people who are wondering what else you have done, be able to find that in an easy way. So one of the things that I think you'll be the most interested in is how it can save you time. So ORCID works, and this is how ORCID describes itself. It works like an ecosystem. So it is meant to be kind of an interoperable CV. So when you're in your record, right, if you remember those categories, you're filling out things that you would include in a CV. And in the record, there's a section, and we'll see it in a few slides. We'll go into more detail, but there's a public print view. And when you hit that, it creates a CV for you from your ORCID record. It's formatted like a CV. So the great thing about this is it's a quick way to generate everything and know that you're not missing it, right? I'm probably not the only one that has had a CV, and every time I do something, I have to go update it and then, you know, rename it or however it works, but it gets really messy and confusing, and you have multiple copies of it. In this way, you will not have multiple copies of your CV anymore. You can just have your ORCID record and then create your CV at any time. And when you, we'll see in a little bit how to populate those categories. And so when you create that, it will always be updated. It's also a quick way to search yourself and ensure that you've gotten all of your publications listed in your CV. And I've had several people email me, and they're looking, you know, they're up for promotion, and they're mining the last 5 years because they've been involved in a lot of research and have a lot of publications, and they can't quite remember them all because, you know, they just have a lot. And that's kind of how it works, especially in scientific research. And so this helps you maintain that with very little hassle. So it's meant to be not extra time for you to fill out all of this stuff, but it's meant to create more time for you to do other things and not worry about these kind of tedious details that are very important. Again, it's a huge time saver. And in another way is that more and more funders and publishers, when you go to their login, you're going to start seeing that little ORCID ID symbol. And when you see that little ORCID ID symbol, you can log in using your ORCID ID, meaning everything that you would have to fill out for submitting a manuscript or applying for a grant, or even depositing in a repository. If they are connected to ORCID and give you that as an option and you put in your ID, it will populate for you. You won't have to do any of that. And here is a closer view of that print view for the up-to-date CV. So again, it can be a huge time saver. And again, more and more publishers and funders are going towards ORCID and are putting that as a login option. So to get started on it now, you will really be ahead of the game. So you'll see here, I don't know if any of you have used Proposal Central, but here's another example. Just be looking for that circle with the green. Proposal Central also allows you to log in with ORCID. So ORCID is meant to be integrated with different systems. That's the whole function of it, right? That you're going to be able to, it's useful because it's integrated with other things. So this is not a complete list at all, but I wanted to show you things that I thought would probably relate to you, or things that you're familiar with or use. So in the yes section, these are the free things. ORCID is funded, ORCID survives because institutions become members. Currently, USD is not a member, but that might not always be the case. So you have a membership, a yearly membership fee that you pay, and that's how ORCID is funded. So some things are only available if your institution has a membership. But these are the free ones, right? So if any of you have used Crossref or DataCite, the DMP tool, I want to point out, USD is now a participating institution with the DMP tool, the tool that you can use to create your data management plans. So when you log in, you can log in using your USD account, but that all links to ORCID. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail when we start going through the records, and I'll help you populate yours if you can log on to your ORCID account. So Figshare, Open Science Framework, PubMed, right? So you'll start seeing more and more in the authors lists, those little green circles. You're going to see it everywhere. And that way, when you click on it, you will get all of the Kevin Johnsons that are that specific Kevin Johnson, right? So I tested this out the other day, and I did a PubMed search with a name that was more common. And it was very hard to shuffle through all of the results. I had hundreds more results than when I searched the ORCID ID. It limited it to, I think it was 12. So it's a huge help when you're doing an author search. So things you might ask about if they're integrated with ORCID and they are not yet is Cayuse. Wouldn't that be great? I think they're in discussions. And then Google Scholar. But we are going to talk about Google Scholar because you can export from Google Scholar and put those records into ORCID. So that list is just increasing. So it's going to save you time also with your funders. So now, as I said before, many funders are requiring you to have a PID, especially in the health sciences. So here are just a few examples. The American Heart Association, the CDC. The most recent one is the National Science Foundation. So the NSF just very recently is requiring that you have a PID when you apply for a grant from them. And again, this is all going back to the Nelson memo and this initiative and all of these changes that are happening in the NIH and the NSF with grant funding to make things more open and immediately available if that research has been publicly funded. So, and just one more thing about the NSF, that will go into effect in October of this year. So it's not yet in effect. So you are ahead of the game by creating your record now and getting everything populated and moved over. So publishers. So Springer Nature really encourages, if you go to the Springer Nature website, which I was playing around with a little bit last week, they have ORCID all over their website, right? So they did a trial in 2017 to mandate ORCID, and they highly encourage it now. They mandate it, but they highly encourage other publishers to mandate it. So so here's some of the publishers that require or very strongly encourage, and I have a hunch that those strongly encouraging ones are going to become requirements in the very near future. But I put on there ones that I thought would relate more directly to you. So these are all linked. And if you're submitting your manuscript, you can link it to your ORCID record and it will fill out a lot of the stuff for you. So this is just kind of a picture of how it's all interconnected, right? So it's used by publishers, funders, and institutions more and more every day are doing this. In 2022, there were over 4,500 active integrations with ORCID, right? Meaning all of these different entities connecting with ORCID. And this is just going to grow as open access becomes. So to sum up these benefits, right? ORCID is used by all of these things. I think it's over 70 publishers now, right now, that are requiring ORCID IDs with manuscript submissions. Grant funders are increasingly requiring it, grant proposals. So currently at USD, you can connect to your to ORCID in 2 different ways. So, and this again might grow if we become a member, but first is the DMP tool, but second is RED. I know I talked in a previous talk about the institutional repository here at USD, and you can include your ORCID record if you deposit your work into RED. If you deposited work a long time ago, there may not have been an ORCID field, and you can contact a librarian to get that changed for you and update it and add your ORCID ID. So the DMP tool and RED are the 2 ways right now that ORCID integrates with USD, but these things will grow. So I just thought this diagram was cool, and we're going to end this section by showing you this this kind of network that some researchers created that they used PIDs. And when I say PID, it's not just your ORCID ID, right? A DOI that is attached to research, ROR, RORs that are attached to organizations, right? These things all provide unique identifiers, unique digital identifiers. But this allows you to find all of these connections. So I know one of the biggest kind of headaches for researchers at USD, in the med school and elsewhere, has to do with finding out what other researchers are doing similar work, right? And this is showing you that just with all of the ORCID IDs, this was published in 2021, this PID graph, and it includes all of DataCite's DOIs, all of the ORCID IDs that were registered at that time, all RORs, Crossref funder IDs, and 9 million Crossref DOIs. So all of that, and it shows you just how it's going to become this kind of interoperable system where it's just much easier to find people working on related research, to find data sets that you need, and more. So with that being said, hopefully I've convinced you that this will benefit you. I just want to show you how to get your ID and to start connecting, because some of the things, once you do it and start connecting those things, it becomes very easy, but the first time is always unfamiliar. So to get the most benefit from your ORCID ID, you want to fill out as much as possible. So if you can, while you have Zoom up, go to that website, http://orcid.org/register. And we will get you started. It takes 30 seconds. And again, it's free. For those of you who already have an ORCID ID, you could log in at this time so that we can walk through. So when you go to that website, this is the page that you're going to get to sign up. So that's it. That's all it is. But I do want to point out that where it says add another email, if you can, I would do that as a safety, just in case, say you switch institutions sometime, and you lose your institutional email address or for whatever reason, right? That's exactly what happened to me with my previous ORCID account. I did my postdoc at Stanford Research. I had an ORCID account associated with that email account, and then I lost it when I was done. So adding another email address will allow you to still log in. Your password, once you do that, you'll set your password and select your notification settings. So if you, so ORCID is only going to send you notifications if one of your trusted parties, and I'll show you what that means in just a second, makes a change to your ORCID data. And this is something that you can give permission to people, for people to do, like adding a publication to your ORCID record. So that will be the second page for your registration. And then this one, which is really important, as I said before, ORCID is, you're in complete control of the privacy settings of ORCID. You can make it so that nobody sees your record or everybody sees your record. So the visibility settings, actually, let me go back one more time to that. I do have a couple of slides that go over that more closely, but so you can make it so that everyone sees it, and that's what most people do, right? Because that's how you're going to get the most out of ORCID, is when people can connect. You can make it so that only trusted organizations can see it, or only me. Then you consent and tell them you're not a robot, and you're good to go. So the ORCID basics are that you have your name, your most recent employer. This is what ORCID recommends. Your most recent education and your most recent works, right? You don't have to put everything in there. But again, the more information that you add, the better it will work for you. So if you're following along, here is that page that once you select your privacy settings, it's going to take you to this page where you can start populating. So you'll see that red box up in the corner, and this is where your visibility settings are going to show up. So as I said, about 87% of people select that everyone can see your ORCID record. So that green one is highlighted, but you can change that at any time. So if you select, when you register, if you select no one, you can change that later. So that is not a problem. So just to show you in more detail, so that's that green little, all the people can see it, right? The red, or the yellow, the golden key is trusted parties, and we're going to talk more about that. And then only me. Those are your 3 visibility settings. Okay. So trusted organizations, and this is a really important part of ORCID. So I want to point this out. And if you're on your record, we are going to see if we can add something for you here. So these could be universities, publishers, grant funders, anyone who needs to make a change, or who you would be okay making a change to your record. Now, why would you want someone to make a change to your record? There are a couple of categories in ORCID that only external organizations can change, like peer review. At the bottom of that homepage, the ORCID record, you'll see peer review. And only the organization that you are doing that for can say that, yes, you're doing that, and add that to your record. So that would be why you would want to make them a trusted organization. The source will show up in the corner. You'll see that that's highlighted. So connecting with trusted organizations increases the chances that your contributions and your work will be linked to you and recognized and credited. So the example here, as I said, is from the University of Virginia with that red box. And it's where ORCID is integrated into the institutional repository here, allowing for an individual to authorize that the university add works to their ORCID record for them. So here's where you're going to add trusted parties. If you go back to your main page and you click on your name, you're going to see a drop-down menu. And there's a link for trusted parties. And once you have allowed organizations to become your trusted parties, they'll show up like that square at the bottom there, with the approval date that you gave. What you can give different organizations different access types. You can, those 3 different privacy settings, you can set those individually in your record. Trusted individuals, you'll go to that same drop down, and you can add people. People who also have ORCID IDs. They have to have an ORCID ID, but they can have access or edit. So people you collaborate with a lot, this might be a useful way for you to keep your record updated and allow people to exchange information if you share research with those people. So when you add somebody, it's going to ask you if you authorized it. So in this example, it's saying that DataCite is asking for access to your ORCID record. So you're going to initiate this from the DataCite website, And then they will send this to you through ORCID, and you'll say authorize access or deny access. Okay. Once you authorize the access, it will show up in your trusted organizations in that drop-down menu. So the example I wanted to use was the DMP tool, because we are an institution, a member institution with the DMP tool. So, and you're all probably working on data management plans. So when you're in the DMP tool, when you click on that drop-down menu, you'll look and you'll see the third party tab there, the third party applications. And this is where you're going to connect ORCID to with DMP. So once you click on that, you'll be able to create, it'll ask you create or connect your ORCID ID. And I have found when I was just playing around with this, that oftentimes when it says log in through a third party, if it doesn't say which third parties those might be, ORCID is often one of the selections. So if you're unsure, I would probably click on log in through a third party and just check that out. So then it's going to, again, ask you, it's going to say the DMP tool is asking for access, and you're going to authorize that access. All right. Now, actually making those connections, once they have access, one of the cool things is that ORCID made data management plans an actual work category. So from the home page of your ORCID main screen, they're near the bottom, there's the Works tab. And this is probably where you'll spend a lot of your time, right? Adding your publications. And there are different ways that you can add. You'll see here, you can add by adding the DOI of something you've already published, the digital object identifier. You can add the bib text file, which is how I'll show you, you'll get it from Google Scholar. You can add manually, or you can do that search and link at the top, and we're going to spend some time doing that. But if you want to add your data management plan, you're going to do that manually, and then it will take you into your the next page, and your ORCID record is going to look like this. When it asks you for the work type, you're just going to scroll down and you're going to select data management plan. So you can be very, very detailed in your ORCID record, right? Some people might think I'm not going to include my data management plan in my ORCID record. But you can be very detailed like that and just have everything that you produce in ORCID. And then you can control what gets printed out when you want to create that CV, right? So that doesn't mean everything is going to show up in there. But it's nice that it's an option to keep everything. Okay, so one of the biggest time savers is the search and link. So when you go back to that main home page and you want to add works, ORCID has a search and link tab that allows you to link to your works from an external database. So the example, these are some of the examples, and I decided to use DataCite as the example today. But you'll select DataCite. It's going to ask for permission, right? You have to authorize access. Every time you want something to link or populate, you have to authorize it. And then you'll be able to search, ideally with your DOI. If you have a DOI, it's always best to use that to populate your ORCID record, because it's just one more way that things are connected and you make sure you have the right information. But so you'll see that at the bottom, there's an ORCID auto update. Once you've given DataCite permission to connect to your ORCID record, you can automatically, anything that goes into DataCite that you have published will go into ORCID. Again, this is something you'll authorize, and you'll just, once you do it once, you'll be able to you'll be able to auto update those records from DataCite. Not from, you'll have to do it individually for the other like Crossref, but each one is individual. So this means that any works that contain your ORCID ID in the metadata within DataCite will be added to your ORCID record automatically. So this also means that anytime you publish anything, if you have the option of adding your ORCID ID to it, you want to do it, because that is how it's going to find you in DataCite, right? So if you didn't add your ORCID ID to your publication, it won't be able to find you. So again, every time, and more publishers are creating this category for ORCID, that is how you're going to be able to link and populate your record. So let's say you found this in DataCite. There is going to be a link that says add to ORCID record. And that is what you will click to get that to show up. It might not show up. Don't be alarmed if it does not show up for a day, say. It might take 24 hours for everything to be updated, but it will eventually show up. And this way, search and link is great because you don't have to enter all that publication information manually. And I would avoid entering things manually if you can. You might have to do it a little bit for things that aren't connected via ORCID that you've done in the past, but the more that you use it, the better it will work for you. So when it shows up in your ORCID record, it's going to show where it came from. So that's going to show up right there in the bottom left-hand corner of that record. I want to point out that ORCID is actually useful for all disciplines. So it's not just the natural and health sciences. That might be the dominant group that uses it, but you can also add lectures, speeches, research techniques, data sets, software. There's like all sorts of different types of contributions that you can add to your ORCID record through work type. So that's also a really useful thing. So now I want to show you the BibTeX. So BibTeX right now really only refers to Google Scholar. This is where you'll use it. So when you import from Google Scholar, when you log into your Google Scholar account, you'll look at your citations. You can select all of them or select just a few. And then you're going to export it as a BibTeX file. And that's how you're going to get it into ORCID. So that's what a BibTeX file looks like. You're going to save it as that. And then you're going to go back to your ORCID record and add works and import that BibTeX file, right? It's going to prompt you to choose that file. And it will show up in your ORCID record. So even though Google Scholar is not integrated with ORCID, you can still get everything into your account through that. Now you'll see that if you don't want everything, let's say you imported everything from Google Scholar and there's some things you don't want, you can always delete those from the record. And I realize I'm getting near the end, so I'm just going to go quickly through these last few. I think we're going to talk more about Science CV in the fall, but I wanted to point out that linking to this is really easy and really useful, and you do it through your NCBI account. So here's that logging into your NCBI account. I would encourage you the next time you log in to do that third-party sign-in option rather than how you have been doing it, just to link it, because once it's linked, it's linked. Once you give it access, you only have to do it once. So here's ORCID as your option. That's your next page. And you're going to have to grant permission, but then you will be connected to NCBI, which is where you can use, you can create your biosketch in your Science CV using ORCID. So you won't have to write all of that yourself. Okay, and again, we will do more of that, and we will show you exactly how to do that and write those biosketches more in the fall.